The US podcast host Joe Rogan has issued an apology over his past use of racial language on his popular show. And this follows an ongoing saga regarding his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, which has been running for over a decade. Several artists have recently quit Spotify in protest at what they allege is Rogan's role in spreading coronavirus misinformation. Spotify is thought to have paid more than $100 million for exclusive rights to the podcast in 2020. But this whole saga does raise a number of issues relating to artistic freedom and whether artists are self-censoring now. So joining me to discuss this is the musician Winston Marshall, everyone. Now, Winston, you've written a very interesting article this week on Substack relating to the Joe Rogan Experience and what has happened here. And you're raising a number of issues about the way in which artists are behaving in the current climate. Do you want to just give us a précis of what you were arguing there?
Absolutely. So all communities are prone to some degree of homogeneity. I think that's a given.
Yeah.
And that's forgivable. It's what Orwell called groupthink. But though it might be forgivable, it's not good. Mm-hmm. So in the creative industries, on various topics, usually divisive topics, soon enough, an orthodox stance is taken. So, for example, on Brexit, even though the country was pretty evenly split, the music industry, British music industry, was almost entirely in favour of the EU.
Yes.
And there was an open letter in 2018 signed by pretty much everyone, sort of condemning it and wanting to turn it round. And the few artists on that particular topic who were against the EU, I think it was Sir Ringo Starr, Roger Daltrey, to name but a couple, were notable because they were much older and basically had the resources that they could say what they wanted.
Yeah, they didn't care, exactly.
Whereas I suspect younger artists on a topic like that should probably keep stum in case they were to face backlash.
I mean, I definitely felt that. I mean, in the comedy world, there were maximum of 5 comedians who were openly pro-Brexit. I was one of those, and so I definitely felt that at that time. But within the arts generally, I think there was a survey, it was something like 97% of artists, and that can't be true, right? That's the first thing to say. That can't be real.
Well, it might be true. It might be that...
Do you think?
That, again, I do think that, I mean, this is what Tocqueville talked about in The Tyranny of the Majority. I do think it's probable if a lot of artists, they have this similar personality traits, mm-hmm. It is possible that they land on the similar spot on various issues. Again, even if that's the case, doesn't mean it's good. Now, when you came out on Brexit within the comedy world, did you have pushback on that?
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. And what were the repercussions? What's an example?
Lost an awful lot of friends.
Were there any professional?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are certain places that wouldn't book me from there on in and that kind of thing. But I'm not trying to pretend I'm a victim.
But your business took a hit.
Yes, yes. So that's why I'm raising scepticism about the idea that the stats are right, because I think lots of people knew that if they were open about their opinion on that, but it's not just that, it's just about politics generally. You have people who are sort of in the closet about various opinions because of what they might fear might happen to them.
Well, look what's happening, or what happened with Joe Rogan last week is he's a chat show host, but he's also a comedian, so you can say he's an artist.
Yeah.
You had a bunch of these musicians and various artists boycotting Spotify, which is legitimate. To boycott is an exercise of their freedom of association, freedom of speech. That's absolutely legitimate. But what's curious about it, and this is the crux, is that they said, take him down or we will leave. Right. They wouldn't just say we're leaving, it's say take him down or we will leave. So they want his speech silenced.
That's the distinction, isn't it? That's the distinction. Because when people criticise Joni Mitchell, say, or Neil Young, the standard rebuttal was, well, but if you care about freedom of speech, they should be able to say what they want. And they should. But the distinction is that they're calling for someone else's silence.
Exactly.
And that's quite an important distinction, isn't it?
It's a big distinction. If someone, the size of Rogan, and he's absolutely huge. Yeah. I mean, his listenership and viewing numbers are 10 times that of the mainstream media and, and the competitors on CNN, etc. If someone of that magnitude can be silenced, what's it like for the young artists who are the young comedians, and what can we possibly imagine an environment is for young artists to create if they risk losing so much in the process?
Yes.
It's untenable.
And you've had some experience of this. I mean, you were in the band Mumford & Sons, and it was to do with expressing a view.
I tweeted about a book critical of far-left extremism in the United States, and Antifa, it turns out, is one of those examples of a topic where, even though, for example, I've seen one poll that suggests that Antifa have a 5% approval rating in the United States, i.e. it's an extreme fringe.
Yes.
So even though it's an extreme fringe, which is very low approval rating, the pushback I got from within the industry was huge. So from radio stations threatening to drop the band, and I was even supposed to DJ at one festival in this country, but because the headliner had condemned me, they cancelled me, and cancelled in the old
the actual literal definition of the word.
So that's Antifa and far left extremism is one of those sort of hot button issues that apparently within the industry does have a sort of...
But that's the point, isn't it? That if there are a sort of set of rules of the opinions that you can have within a creative industry, then, as you say, it must cause people to be... Because artists, by their nature, think outside the box, right?
They have to.
And yet, all of these things that we're describing seem very much in line with establishment thought, don't they? I mean, Brexit's a good example because it was the Tory government that were pushing for it.
Yeah, and after Neil Young and the other artists...
And Joni
Mitchell, Crosby, Stills and Nash, and in this side of the pond, Stuart Lee, after they made their stand against the Joe Rogan experience, the White House then followed suit and sort of agreed and said... what do they call it? Misinformation, something, which is the kind of the term that the Biden era seems to use in the same way the Trump era used fake news.
Yes.
They use that. So basically, these huge artists are completely in tow and in line with the government.
And yet some of them are old hippies, people like Joni Mitchell. You'd think they were anti-establishment. And now you've got people... Yeah, exactly. So what would you say then to young creative people in this situation? And, what can they do?
I think, a return to good faith discourse needs to come. And I personally believe in more speech, not less speech, as an answer. And if these are bad ideas that Rogan is talking about, and if Neil Young has the answers, let's hear him. Let's have him on a Spotify podcast.
Problem is, Winston, you are in the minority there. I think you're...
Well, I'm hopeful. And I... in the spirit of free speech, last week launched a new podcast, The Spectator, and there are artists who are prepared to talk. So I had Alexander Solzhenitsyn's son, Ignat Solzhenitsyn, who's a very accomplished composer, come and talk about classical music and talk about those sort of issues that are happening within classical music. Tomorrow I have an interview with David Baddiel that comes out, and he talks about... anti-Semitism, which is, I really think, is one of those hot-button issues, particularly when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, which now Israel-Palestine artists on whole tend to take a position which is quite different from the establishment, actually. So there's more pro-Palestine, and there's not as much of a pro-Israel group amongst musicians. I think Gene Simmons of Kiss is a prominent name, but generally speaking...
I remember Radiohead getting in trouble for wanting to perform in Israel and that kind of thing. I believe that's right, anyway. So it's very much, again, it seems like irrespective of the topic, an orthodoxy tends to emerge within the creative industry.
Exactly. And you get punished if you break with the orthodoxy.
So with your podcast, what's it called and where can people find it?
Marshall Matters.
Very good.
The true...
alliterative, I like it, yeah.
And it sort of tickles the narcissist in me. And you can get it on all the usual podcast outlets.
And it's a Spectator podcast?
With The Spectator.
And do you have any other guests coming up that you can mention or not?
I have Don McLean talking about how American Pie predicted this whole mess that we're in.
Really?
And
I'm familiar with the lyrics. I can't think where that happened particularly.
It's a very long song.
Yes, it is very long.
That sounds
fantastic. So, Winston Marshall, everyone.